The fourth season of Rick and Morty is nothing short of one of the most anticipated seasons of television ever. However, for as much as fans are looking forward to it, we don't know when it's coming out, let alone what it's about. That leads to a lot of fans creating theories about what might appear in the next season. And also being incredibly rude to McDonald's employees, but we don't need to talk about the Szechuan sauce incident. One of the more popular theories to emerge in this downtime is that Morty is actually a younger version of his supposed grandfather, Rick. However, this theory doesn't really hold up under scrutiny, and this video will break down why it can't be true. Buckle up in your spaceship made of garbage, because this video will explore the entire Rick and Morty multiverse to disprove one of the biggest theories in the fandom. A lot of the information that supports the theory that Rick is an older version of Morty comes from the 7th episode of Season 3, Tales from the Citadel. Here we see different versions of Rick and Morty from other universes go about their lives in a society composed entirely of themselves. It's one of the best episodes from the past season, and manages to expertly weave together 4 different storylines. The first piece of information that supposedly supports the theory that Rick is an older version of Morty comes from all of the Ricks being the same age, and that all of the Mortys being the same age. This means that across every conceivable reality where the two exist, Rick and Morty always have the same age difference. Fans who support this theory reason that this could only be the case if in every reality an older Morty went back in time to become a Rick for his younger self.
I'm Morty, you're Rick.
Now that might sound a bit convoluted, but this is a show where a mad scientist can turn himself into a sentient pickle. So just about any idea can come to light in Rick and Morty. This episode also features a scene where Mortys from different universes learn how to be good sidekicks for Ricks in need of a partner. In this classroom setting, we discover that a slow-witted Rick is treated as though he's a Morty.
Yes, slow Rick, tall Morty.
This suggests that there isn't any intrinsic difference between the two, and that one could fill the other's role in the right circumstances. This is further reinforced in the episode when Cop Morty takes a mentor role to a Rick who just graduated from the Citadel's police academy. Many fans have taken this tidbit of world building to mean that Mortys eventually grow into Ricks. They argue that Rick and Morty's many adventures are turning Morty into a super genius like his supposed grandfather. Also, that the trauma from these shenanigans is making Morty just as messed up as Rick. While the idea that Morty can become just as smart and capable as Rick is kind of inspiring, if true, it's kind of a bummer that Morty is destined to be just as dysfunctional and self-destructive as Rick. The last major bit of support for this theory comes from the relationship between the main Rick and the main Morty in the cartoon. Despite his claims to the contrary, Rick has shown time and time again that he genuinely cares about his grandson. Rick destroyed the Jelly Bean King after he assaulted Morty and was willing to perish in a destabilized time so that Morty could survive. People have theorized that Rick cares so much for Morty because he is Morty. The overwhelmingly selfish and conceited Rick only cares about himself.
You sold a gun to a murderer so you could play video games?
And he does so much for Morty because Morty is a past version of himself. Considering how indifferent Rick is toward the rest of the family, it wouldn't be all that surprising if he only cared about Morty because the teen is a younger version of himself. Okay, now that we've outlined the biggest arguments supporting this bold theory, we can get into why it's totally bogus. The creators of Rick and Morty, Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, have been pretty adamant about how they don't want to tell any stories centered on time travel in Rick and Morty. They believe that the concept is pretty played out and that they wouldn't add anything new to the genre by using it in episodes of Rick and Morty. That's why there's a box labeled time travel stuff that's filled with junk in Rick's garage workshop. It shows how little interest Rick as a character has in using time travel on his many adventures. There's an infinite number of giant universes for Rick to explore, and both the character and the creators are far more interested in depicting those adventures than stories through time. The show even goes out of its way to belittle characters and storylines tied to time travel. In the first episode of Season 2, A Rickle in Time, Rick, Morty, and Summer beat up a fourth dimension creature that travels through time and polices the flow of time. Then, in the first episode of Season 3, The Rickshank Redemption, Rick creates an entirely false series of events when an alien tries to uncover secrets in Rick's past. Even if that episode is more digging into Rick's memories than traveling through time, it's clear that the cartoon isn't interested in using some sci-fi storytelling device to reveal Rick's origins. A lack of time travel in Rick and Morty really hurts the theory that Rick and Morty are the same person. After all, that eliminates the chance of an aged Morty traveling back in time to become a Rick to his younger self. Then again, Rick is the smartest person in the universe, so there are other ways that he and Morty could be the same person. So far in the show, we've seen Rick create entire universes just for the sake of powering his spaceship. So it wouldn't be all that surprising if it turned out that Morty was a clone of Rick, or something along those lines. In fact, Rick creating Morty has even more evidence supporting it than Morty growing into Rick.
Oh, man.
In the 10th episode of Season 1, Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, we briefly see one of Rick's memories where he is interacting with an infant Morty. This shouldn't be possible because we were told that Rick left his family prior to his daughter Beth's marriage to Jerry Smith and the birth of his grandchildren. There's clearly something going on here.
That doesn't make any sense, Rick.
It opens up the possibility that Morty is a clone of Rick that the scientist left with his daughter's family and just changed their memories to fit the current circumstances. Or maybe that infant Morty in the video is actually evil Morty, but we addressed that possibility in another video, and you should totally check that out. Sadly though, this cloning explanation for how Rick and Morty are the same person still don't hold up. This is because we know from previous episodes that Rick didn't look like Morty when he was in his early teens. In the 7th episode of Season 2, Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, Rick inhabits the body of a younger clone of himself and dubs himself Tiny Rick.
So here I am. I'm Tiny Rick. Okay.
Which is what Rick and Morty fans used to shout before Pickle Rick came along. Even though Tiny Rick and Morty are both about 14 years old, the two look nothing alike. Tiny Rick just looks like a younger version of Rick. He and Morty might be the same height, but they don't have any similarities besides that. If Morty really were a clone for Rick, then Tiny Rick would be almost identical to Morty since they're both clones. With both time travel and cloning eliminated as possible explanations for Rick and Morty being the same person, there aren't many explanations left for how the theory might be correct. Even if just about anything can happen in an episode of Rick and Morty, other explanations for how the two could be the same person require a pretty sizable suspension of disbelief. Moreover, even if Morty could be a younger version of Rick, would that really improve the show? A lot of time over the course of Rick and Morty's 3 seasons has gone into showing how much Morty is growing and reinforcing how Rick is a sad and broken character. In the pilot episode of the cartoon, Morty was terrified and extremely reluctant to go on an adventure with Rick. His grandfather's many sci-fi tools were completely alien to him, and actual aliens terrified Morty. The episode ended with Morty losing all control of his body as his grandfather raved about their future adventures, denoting just how overwhelmed Morty was by his grandfather's world. Over the course of future episodes, though, Morty would grow accustomed to the many bizarre and otherworldly elements his grandfather brought into his life, and even start to thrive under those circumstances. Over the course of the 2nd season, Morty learns how to drive Rick's spaceship. He also grows more familiar in dealing with various aliens and even starts learning how to use some of Rick's advanced technology. Morty also quickly becomes one of the most emotionally intelligent members of his family. He recognizes his and his sister's poor reactions to their parents' divorce and is aware of the positive and negative ways that they're coping with the separation. He also becomes very familiar with his grandfather's destructive behavior and even begins to make sure Rick's drunken exploits don't harm others. This was most explicitly seen in the 4th episode of Season 3, Vindicators 3: The Return of Worldender. In short, Morty has only grown into a more well-rounded and capable person as the series has gone on, and is very aware of the bad habits that torment his grandfather and other family members. Meanwhile, Rick has only become less enviable as the show has gone on. Even if he is the smartest person in the universe, this only lets Rick run away from his problems rather than addressing his underlying issues. Like how he would rather nearly perish as a pickle rather than spend even a minute in family therapy. It's clear now that Rick is deeply unwell and that no one should aspire to be like him. That's why it would be a shame if this theory was correct and Morty was destined to grow up to be like Rick. A lot of the show is dedicated to Morty realizing that Rick isn't that great and learning how to be better than him. Thankfully, there's very little chance of this theory proving true. There's just too much evidence against it for that to happen. There's very little chance of actual time travel popping up in the show to explain how Rick and Morty are the same person. Both the characters and the creators themselves have expressed a disdain for the particular sci-fi concept. Morty can't be a clone of Rick either. We know what Rick looks like at various points in his life thanks to his previous cloning efforts, and there's hardly any resemblance to Morty. Even if this theory is an interesting reading of the show, it can't be true, and Morty really is just Rick's grandson. That's probably for the best though. A lot of what makes Rick and Morty a terrific show is seeing Morty become a more well-rounded person by learning from the mistakes and failings of his family, especially Rick. While the show can go in just about any direction in its next season and the rest of its run, it almost has to end with Rick acknowledging Morty as a better person than himself. It's a lot harder for that to happen if the two are the same person though, which is why Morty is almost certainly not a younger version of Rick.
If this works, drinks are on me.
What do you think of this Rick and Morty theory though? Have we successfully debunked that Morty isn't a younger version of Rick, or are you still holding out for this fan theory? Please let us know in the comments section down below, along with any of your other theories about this incredible cartoon. We have loads of videos about the most popular fan theories already up on our channel, and have plenty more coming soon. We promise you're not going to want to miss a single one. To help with that, be sure to click the bell icon. That way you'll get a notification as soon as we upload a new video, and you'll be able to watch it before anyone else has the chance to.